prime minister, has been the prime minister of Israel since 2009, all but 1 year. It's normal in a democracy that people get tired of their current leader. In addition, Israel is a parliamentary democracy, and there are members of the prime minister's ruling coalition that are deeply unpopular, that are seen as extreme, or that are seen as avoiding the mandatory draft that we have in Israel at a time when reservists in their 40s are doing extended service. So the prime minister is seen as a fixture of the status quo that many people want to change.
So Donald Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are set to meet in the coming hours as the US president tries to secure a ceasefire in Gaza. It comes after a round of peace talks in Qatar between Israel and Hamas came to an end this weekend without a breakthrough. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt being asked about the negotiations earlier.
I don't want to comment on the details of the arrangement out of respect for these negotiations, but an agreeable and appropriate ceasefire proposal has been sent to Hamas. And I can also tell you Special Envoy Witkoff intends to travel to Doha later this week, where he will continue to engage in these discussions. And the Qataris and the Egyptians have been incredibly helpful partners in mediating these negotiations and discussions.
Well, Daniel Rubenstein is a former advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu. Good evening, Daniel. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening to you.
Many believe that a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas is close. Do you think so too?
I would describe myself as cautiously pessimistic. What Israel and Hamas appear to be negotiating right now is how many hostages will Hamas be able to continue to hold in its underground dungeons where it tortures and starves them. Hamas is not willing to release every hostage and lay down its weapons and end the war that it started nearly 2 years ago. Israel has indicated that it is willing to pay a ransom because it wants its people home, its people who were taken from their homes on October 7th, 2023. We are willing to pay a price to bring them home. But we are not willing to allow Hamas to remain the government of Gaza with the military, where it can continue to threaten to destroy Israel. I want this war to end, but Hamas wants it to keep going forever.
So I have seen some press reports, and please do debunk these if you know better, that a small group of Hamas leaders will be able to remain in Gaza. Israel, of course, have been pushing for the complete exile of the Hamas terror group and its leaders. But will now settle for the symbolic expulsion of a few military commanders, given there are so few of them left. How do you feel about that a small group of Hamas leaders will, according to reports, be allowed to remain in Gaza as part of this deal?
I think the details that you mentioned can be negotiated, but the big picture, it's very difficult to find a middle ground between Israel's position and Hamas's position. Hamas's position remains that Israel must be destroyed, and Israel's position remains that it does not want to be destroyed. That is the premise of this war, and I don't see a way out of it unless Hamas decides to end the war and release the hostages. If a few Hamas guys will be left behind in Gaza, but they will have no military and no governing capability, that is a big compromise for Israel to make, but I think it's possible if it will achieve the bigger objectives.
And are we talking about the complete withdrawal of Israeli troops, the IDF? So any oversight by Israel would cease as part of this deal?
Hamas is demanding the complete withdrawal of Israel from Gaza because Hamas wants to remain the government of Gaza. And Israel has said, if we are going to withdraw from Gaza, which we would like to, we have no interest in governing Gaza, but if we're going to withdraw, we cannot allow a return to the situation that existed on October 6, 2023, one day before the Hamas government of Gaza decided to launch a war of annihilation against the people of Israel. So if Israel is going to withdraw from Gaza, which it wants to, then Gaza needs a new government that chooses to live in peace with Israel and lets us all move on and build a better future.
And who should oversee the creation of that new government? There would have to be elections, and I've spoken to Palestinian leaders about this. They have plans, there could be elections, and it could be done fairly, but that will take quite some time. And I think the most urgent thing is to get hostages released, but also to try and bring an end to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Civilians there are still losing their lives, and I know Israel are doing their best, they will argue, to try and completely eradicate Hamas, but it is not an ideal situation over there, and it's not a long-term situation either.
I share your sentiment. It is not an ideal situation at all. It is my friends and neighbors who are part of the Israeli military that are entering very dangerous areas in Gaza, and I would rather them not be there. But behind Israeli soldiers are the Israeli villages that were invaded on October the 7th, Israeli villages that continue to take rocket attacks from the areas of Gaza that Hamas controls. So yes, it is very difficult. I would hope that a new government that can control the Gaza Strip would be decided by the people of Gaza, who will choose a better path than the Hamas government of Gaza did. But in order for the people of Gaza to even have a chance to choose a new way, Hamas is going to have to end this war by giving up power.
And we were also talking as part of this deal, and again, these are not confirmed bits of information, but they are being widely reported, that there would be hundreds of Palestinian prisoners released. There is a question mark about how much Israel will withdraw from Gaza. And there also is proposed a dramatic increase in the volume of aid. And I understand that would involve once again other aid agencies. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is currently giving out aid. That is problematic to a certain point. We've been reporting on that. But I understand that former aid agencies within the Gaza Strip will be allowed to operate again. Is that similar to what you're hearing potentially?
The issue of humanitarian aid is, of course, critical. The system that existed in the past was one where Israel allowed massive quantities of food and supplies to enter the Gaza Strip via UN and other agencies. The UN and other agencies rely on local employees, Palestinians in Gaza, to distribute this aid. It is no secret that in territory that Hamas governs, Hamas is going to control the distribution of food and supplies. And if Hamas controls the distribution, it means it is taking a cut from all of the sales. And where does Hamas put the money that it gets from the sale of food and supplies? It's using it to give money to its fighters, to recruit new ones, and to pay the people who are holding the hostages. So the old system is one which saw the war extend and last longer. Now we have a new system in place. The US and Israel have set up a nonprofit foundation that is supplying the people of Gaza with food, but it is not allowing this food to be distributed by the Hamas government. This is a system that, of course, Hamas does not like because it pushes Hamas out of the picture. And I understand quite well that Hamas is demanding that we go back to the old system, which Hamas benefited from. Now, again, this is something that can be negotiated if Hamas is willing to release the hostages. But for Hamas to demand a return to the old system and to demand that it be allowed to keep some hostages and that it be allowed to demand that it remain the government of Gaza is a bit too much, and that's why we're at an impasse.
Look, there have been continued attacks while people have been queuing for aid. More than 700 Palestinians have been killed seeking aid. That is what the health ministry says there. We know that US aid workers were wounded in an attack recently at the weekend as well. So, as I said, it is a problematic situation. Look, I wonder how you feel the Israeli Prime Minister has been dealing with this. What is your assessment of your former boss?
I think the Prime Minister of Israel has the most difficult job in the world, and I do not envy him for it. He is not just dealing with this unsolvable war in Gaza. We have been dealing with a 7-front war since October the 7th. One day later, in 2023, the Hezbollah terrorist army opened fire from the north and forced more than 60,000 Israelis out of their homes. And we had a year of Hezbollah rockets, drones, anti-tank missiles, and so on, until the Hezbollah terrorist army was decimated. And it remains to be seen what the future of Hezbollah will be in Lebanon. We've seen the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. Assad was a supporter of the Iranian regime, and Assad hosted Iranian officers on his territory. They are, for the most part, no longer there. The Prime Minister of Israel is also dealing with the Houthi terror pirates in Yemen. This is a militia in Yemen that has shut down international shipping in the Red Sea out of solidarity with the Hamas terrorist army in Gaza. We are dealing also with the Iranian regime and its nuclear program. So we are dealing with a multi-front war. Israeli politics is not known to be a soft arena, and the Prime Minister is fighting for his political life at the same time.
And look, all of that may be true, Daniel, but what would you say to people who argue that actually it suits Benjamin Netanyahu politically to have his hands in so many fights? That actually some of this is by design. It supports his strength, his coalition in government if he continues to fight in this way?
I think the prime minister has shown throughout his career that he is extremely averse to war. He is very cautious. He waits until the last possible moment before making a dramatic decision. He did not seek this war. He did not want this war. And I'm sure that he would want to be out of this war and to move on and build a better future and bring more countries into the Abraham Accords, which is one of his landmark accomplishments.
Why is he so unpopular among the Israeli public? Why does he have a hard time?
There's a number of reasons. First of all, the October 7th massacre happened on his watch. That gives him a degree of responsibility for what happened, as he is the prime minister and is responsible for what happens underneath him. He has not allowed yet the formation of an official commission of inquiry that will look into the reasons why the Israeli military was not present on October 7th and failed to stop the massacre. In addition, the prime minister has been the prime minister of Israel since 2009, all but 1 year. It's normal in a democracy that people get tired of their current leader. In addition, Israel is a parliamentary democracy, and there are members of the prime minister's ruling coalition that are deeply unpopular, that are seen as extreme, or that are seen as avoiding the mandatory draft that we have in Israel at a time when reservists in their 40s are doing extended service. So the prime minister is seen as a fixture of the status quo that many people want to change.
Yeah, he is also still facing prosecution over accusations of bribery, fraud, breach of trust charges, which he denies. But that lingers on in the background. Let's just talk a tiny bit further on Netanyahu, the man. Would he consider stepping aside in your judgment if that was what was needed for peace?
I don't understand the premise of the question if it's needed for peace. I don't see how that could happen. We have very hostile neighbors that do not care who the prime minister of Israel is. They're maintaining their war. The Iranian regime, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. So no, it does not appear that the prime minister is seeking to step down for any reason. He will probably run for re-election when it's time at the end of 2026 if he doesn't call elections sooner.
And what do you make of the Iranian president who today has claimed that Israel tried to assassinate him during that 12-day war between the two countries?
I'm not sure what to make of his specific claims. I didn't watch the latest interview yet, but the Iranian president is presiding over a regime that one of its core tenets is to call for the destruction of Israel and to sponsor the groups that are committed to our destruction and to develop a military nuclear program. This is who the Iranian regime represents. This is their key points. And this is unfortunately why Israel had to engage in a strike of the Iranian regime's nuclear program, because they plan to use this to cement their rule and to build a ring of fire around our borders that they can turn on at a moment's notice.